Okay, it's time for a big one. Quiberon Bay. This is one of the great naval battles. Hawke has been pursuing, what's this guy's name? Conflans fleet. And in very bad weather, Conflans decides to take refuge in the bay. And Hawke pursues him in. And this was a major English victory here that really pretty much destroyed the French Navy for the remainder of the 7 Years' War. Here we're hitting in 1759, 20th of November. You can imagine how bad the weather would likely be. Okay, so some new rules because of it. First of all, we're playing with shoals in this one, which means all these kind of stains on the map that you see, those could be actual things. Well, not this one. This one I think is a little bit of food or something that was on my finger. I'm not sure. It doesn't feel at all greasy, but there's nothing else like it on the map. I think it's something that stained through from the last time I played, not this most recent, but when I played with my wife. Wind is heading north. That doesn't sound too bad for the French. The English are the ones who are going to be beating against it here. This is going to last a total of 16 turns. The British have an audacity of 2 here. The French only have none. But the shoals, what's up with them? This B area, this pale area here, that's coastline. You hit that, you've run aground. All that means is you can no longer move for the rest of the scenario, but you can still fire your guns. Of course, you might not be the best able to position yourself to. D, which is this kind of darker area here, this is going to be also coastline. And then a couple of little shoals here, which also count, J and M. And I have to kind of remember this, I think I'll be able to, that these are the places where, in any case, if you run into them, it's an automatic running aground, and you will be stuck there. There's no shallow water you can try to slip through here. They've got a little map here to show you the image, and it fits more or less what I've got, so I'm pretty happy. I seem to have set it up largely okay. Speaking of setting things up largely okay, here's what I'm doing with my sorting from the last battle. I put everything in alphabetical order. And I have to stretch into here because I don't have enough tray places. And it worked pretty well. There were a couple of ships that are, in both scenarios. And it was easy to find them. The only thing I'm really worried about is the Spanish ships. But I can put the Spanish ships all in one bag and the Dutch and the Danes all in one bag. They're just not in that many battles. There aren't that many ships. It's the English and French that are a pain. And getting them alphabetized, I think, is just the best way to handle this. There might be some letters that I can combine together, but for the most part, it just makes sense in terms of ease of finding. The problem with it, well, if I have, say, 15 bags, or 26 in the worst case, and I have to open up half of those to play any given scenario, that's kind of a pain in the ass. But maybe not so much of one as sorting everything. On the other hand, I could throw it all in one bag like I had before, because quite frankly, if you're only going to play one scenario, the 20 minutes of sorting for a scenario isn't that bad if you've got an opponent. All right, and if I'm going to do a whole series of battles like I did, like I'm doing here again, well, the cost for that whole sorting experience, you can amortize it over all the battles. Yeah, I'm kind of babbling about useless stuff here as usual. Okay, special rules. The British get the automatic initiative on turn 1, and leadership-wise, Hawke is a 4, and Conflans, I'm sure, is nowhere near as good. He's a 2. Of course, if he gets killed, you replace him with another commander. And the other one, wind change, is checked every other turn. It's going to be breezy. What does that mean? Damned if I remember. I forgot to look that up. But we've got different wind effects here. I know normally that changes how often you check. That may be all it does. And in this case, instead of checking every 5th turn, you're going to check every other turn. So every even numbered turn you check for the wind change. See if there's anything else that affects that. And whenever you're firing leeward with the wind and you roll a 0, you roll twice more. If these are both zeros, okay, pretty low chance of that, but it's an indication that you've taken on so much water that your ship just sunk, kind of at random. Very unlikely to happen, but the weather was terrible during this battle, as you can imagine, in a late November battle. All right, well, I'm going to take a little break after having set up, but we'll get to this. Okay, let's kick off Quiberon Bay. I've set my command decisions up. And here the French, it's kind of hard to decide how I'm going to cut them, but I'm just going to slice them this way. For the English, it's pretty easy. You got the facing change. Well, wait, I got a second command there. Or a third command. Oops, moving a little too fast. Okay. I'm going to roll my initiative. And the French leader is well below the English leader. The English get the initiative easily. So now, here's the interesting part. For the English, and I think they want to force the French to move first, the problem on their side is, one, yeah, heading this way they're fine. They're moving with the wind in a reach, whereas the French appear to be moving with a running position, which is less advantageous with sail ships, because the wind's coming directly through all the sails. It hits the rear ones, and that cuts some of the power from the forward ones, whereas this is slicing through, kind of coming from the rear and catching all the sails fully, gives them the more movement. We'll discuss that over in Fighting Sail. It's a pretty common factor in sailing ship games, I think. So, in terms of that, it seems like the English have an easier time. Or, I'm sorry, in terms of that, you would argue, well, the English have the wind advantage, but they don't really, because if they want to fight and they have the aggression, audacity advantage here, and it's somewhat of a penalty because it means they can't disengage. It means that if they turn into the French, they're going to be beating at best. Now here's the thing. I've got these 2 terrain pieces on the board. And what I'd like to do is kind of catch the French against the terrain. And what the French want to do is force the English to maybe try to come around so that I can catch them behind. So it's just an interesting positioning here. In terms of guns, I don't remember if I mentioned this. The ships are lower guns for their rates than you might expect. So, for example, you see these undergunned things. That's really just a matter of the age of the ships at this point. There's less guns. I know I talked to my wife about it. There's less guns on each ship than you would see in a slightly later period. In 20 years, these ships would have a lot more guns on board them, or a lot more firepower, if not, actually guns as well. But this is supposedly a first rate, and it's only carrying 80 guns. So, we're going to see these ships are fairly sturdy against the firepower they're providing, is what it works out to be. All right, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to tell the French to go first. Unlike the last time where it was a parallel running battle for Majorca, here we have a decent separation between the fleets. So there's a lot of room for maneuvering and setting yourself up. That's the end of the first turn. Nothing exciting happening here, but now it's the second turn, and we're going to have a wind change opportunity. The wind changing could be a big deal here. Right now it's very much against the English. let's take a shot and see what we get there. Basically what we've seen in this turn is both sides have turned completely towards each other. The English are going to give up the wind gauge, essentially. But we'll see where that goes. Maybe, if I can find the wind change table. There it is. Maybe it'll turn a little more in their favor. No change. So we're going to have to keep approaching in this kind of lousy wind. Once again, the divisions are kind of arbitrary. This time the French got the higher die roll, but the English have a better commander by enough that they got the initiative anyhow. In fact, with their audacity advantage, they'd have the initiative even if they had only been a 1-point separation between the two. Audacity is a big deal. Not only does it affect your initiative, which, can determine the order of play, obviously, but maybe more importantly, hard to tell, it gives a bonus on your firing on every attack. Now, just a +1 last time was a big deal for the English. This time they've got a +2. This is a much bigger victory for them. So that willingness isn't really a penalty in many cases, except for you can't disengage when you have the higher audacity. Once again, I'm going to hand things over to the French. I see no reason to commit my own forces at this distance as to where they're going to go first. As we finish up turn 2, going into turn 3, I've decided to run it along this side. It's because I had some trouble with the charts coming into interference with the turn record track over there. I could just make a turn record track, right? What we have is the English beginning to attempt sort of an outflanking maneuver. But the problem is this is a naval battle. And the wind is protecting this flank, essentially. So any kind of maneuver coming through here to try to outflank is going to have to tack through the wind. And that means this formation, whatever it is that's going to be doing that outflanking, is going to be probably disorganized by going through the wind. If we look at the tacking table, the ship with a commander gets a bonus, but otherwise the only real advantage we get is having the enemy at least more than 10 hexes away, which probably isn't going to be happening. I got to be careful of these shoals here. So mainly I want to avoid the +1 for the -1 for the 3 hexes. I get a fairly good chance of successfully tacking, but I may not get much movement, so it will probably disrupt things a little bit and prevent me from getting the kind of forward motion, and I'm moving slowly to begin with this beating action against the wind. Meanwhile, the French, who kind of are positioned for an equal outflank on their right, have all the advantages. They have the wind in their favor. If they end up swinging into to move in to complete that outflank, they're going to be moving into a running position, which isn't fantastic, but then they can launch themselves back into a reaching and be able to maintain their speed upon contact, kind of slicing back across like this. That would be after they've positioned themselves a little bit forward, perhaps. Plus, they have the side slip advantage, which allows them to reposition without changing their facing. Nice combination of advantages. As we start to close, the French get the initiative. And again, they're going to buck things to the English. We're getting close enough there could be fire at this point. But it still seems like it's time. There's still time to deploy a little bit. And I'd rather see what they do before I react. I can probably, with the defensive fire rules, make my decision at the moment as to whether or not I need to defend myself in particular. At the end of the round, the French and English have finally engaged over here on the French left flank, trading shots about equally. These are about equal rate ships. This one's a much smaller ship. This was a first rate, but it actually dealt out quite a bit due to the English audacity bonus, etc. These two ships are both on fire. You can't see that there, but I've got to make up my chart, though, for all these ships to keep track of who's done first fire and who hasn't. It's a pain in the butt, but I like that role. I think it adds a lot of both historical accuracy, but also a lot of decision making in the game. Otherwise, you always fire, right? But here, there's a reason to wait until you see the whites of their eyes or underwear or whatever. All right. You can see the French put out their fire, but the English did not get theirs out. Nothing else exciting happening here at this point as we move into turn 4, which is again going to be a potential wind change turn. All right, well, the wind still didn't change. We're in the same direction. The English won the initiative, and we're close enough now. See, here's the problem with defensive fire. It's actually to your advantage to let the other guy go first, unless he's going to cross your T's. This looks like the French are coming straight in to penetrate. That's certainly what the English are willing to do. Both sides swinging through and then moving up, turning with the wind to take advantage of that and speed. There's plenty of room between these that the English will have room to turn around. One of the advantages of having the shoals behind you is if the English penetrated, their movement would be very restricted back here. Now they've got an open sea behind the French, so penetrating doesn't seem like a bad move at all. And it's more doctrinally correct. I'm going to give it to the French, see if they try to do anything tricky here. Otherwise, I get first shots through the defensive fire. Either if the French don't fire, I can take my defensive fire shots, and the French do not get a defensive response to that, except with out-of-command ships, and they don't have any. Or, if the French fire on their move, I get to shoot right away. So basically, I'm going to get some initial fire on here. It does give away some of the initiative, though, because so this French ship can move here or can back sails and swing with an aft rake. So there's some definite issues here, but I get the first shot off in that instance. And I think that's enough to make up for the rake, given that I've got some depth to my line. This is going to be a painful one to do. Anyway, the French have engaged pretty heavily with the British. You can see they've gotten shot up. Oh, I forgot to take this shot. Oh well, I'll have another chance. They've gotten shot up by a number of these. You see a lot of firepower in both directions, crossing the aft here, but he had to present, this ship, I think, had to present his bow for a potential rake there. This guy coming in presented a bow rake to somebody. I don't remember who. Anyway, a lot of firepower, a lot of hits going on. It's hard to tell what's going on. This thing's vulnerable, though, so it may strike. Actually, it's pretty close to... Yeah, I was considering bringing this one in for a partial broadside, but I decided, you know, this is a game, it's a fleet battle. It's not just trying to knock out a couple of ships. The firepower of this thing, it's on fire, it's in trouble, it's already shot this round. Let's ignore it for now and keep my line nicely dressed, rather than, you know, trying to get a cheap shot here and there by swerving a ship. The English are going to have a hard time getting these guys around into a good position because the wind's coming up this way, and that's not good for them. Just noticed a misprint on this counter. It doesn't have the -1 reminder. It's a 6, and it does not have that to remind me that I should be adding 1 to my rate. But it's a penalty, so that's cool. But it's kind of a shame that there's some misprints in here, because I could see myself making that mistake at some point, seeing that. I don't know what to do about it, because I'm just going to be reaching in and grabbing. I could probably put some of those 5 6s away if I find a number of them. The English continue their pass through here, ordering their ships in such a way to get maximum number of fires. This thing's damaged on fire, really kind of struggling, and that's not a small ship. That was not my big guy, but what is he? He's a pretty decent ship. I think this is the big one here. And we're just really clobbering that kind of weaker French line there, and I'm expecting to do similarly here. It's this side that I got to worry about. I don't know quite what to do with the squadron that's facing them. I'm probably not going to have too much choice, though. The French are going to have the movement into me, and that's going to, really kind of determine it'll just be a slugfest over there, one that'll probably go strongly in the French's advantage, in the same sort of way that the English got the advantage here, with multiple ships passing by at a distance firing in. If we look at the way the French line is built, I'm trying to figure out how to move this central formation. It's so thin in part of this formation. I've chosen a weird position because part of it's nice and dense like the British formation. Now the nice dense part, I could sail right through that British formation and feel pretty comfortable that I'll give as good as I get. But these flank units, if they slide through that, they're going to have to turn. They're going to have to, they can't just sail right through the British formation, or they'll be facing a gauntlet of 3 ships to their 1, essentially, right? Because this is 3 deep. So, do I make the turn right at the front and not even give the British a shot? So like this, boink, 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 and maybe get a bow rake? Or do I sail through and then make my cut behind? And of course, even if I turn, I'm still going to face all these ships raking me afterwards. There's just nothing really pleasant about this, but I can at least scramble up that British formation with my few ships. Unfortunately, I don't have a commander right in this area. So if I turn these, I'm kind of forced to turn him as well, just to keep this little squadron in command. And it's a really tough problem for me at this point. Probably what I'll spend my whole morning on, trying to figure out what I want to do there. I shouldn't do that, though. My thinking on this game is make your decisions fast. These captains, okay, granted, these are maybe 20-minute turns or something. I don't know if that's specified, if there's any scale here. But these captains should be making their decisions 5 to 10 minutes. They're going to have to make their decisions fairly quickly. And this approach has been happening. I've had a few minutes to look at this, and I don't know. But those commands had to go out already. A brief moment of hesitation with this ship turning. Bad choice, but it got it out of the way. Well, it could have pulled further up. The rest of the squadron looks like it's starting to head straight through the British fleet. The reason for this, I'm able to get multiple shots on these frontline units and really whack them hard. Yes, I'm going to take some real damage against these weaker, unsupported units in comparison to what I'm dealing out. But now the rest of these can just penetrate through, and this, my flank, is capable of doing kind of the cleverness. That's going to leave this ship out of command, but such is life. I screwed it up. That's my own fault. But the French are fighting like they're British here. They're charging right in and they're firing for the hull. It's almost that I am emotionally incapable of playing the French doctrine correctly. The French should have stood at a distance, sailed about, tried to hit British rigging, cause fires, cause problems there. They can get more damage, knock out some of these ships, and then engage close after they've weakened the enemy fleet. But that's a hard game to play. It's like playing the Klingon fleet in SFB, where you've got to kind of stand in this perfect range and avoid the enemy and fire and dance away and all that. That's hard to do when you have a whole fleet to keep organized. So, charge! Fiddling around, getting more of a feel, I've noticed a kind of cute maneuver I made. I did this with the last ship. I'm doing it with this one too. I think it's here to begin with. From here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and now I'm going to go for a bow rake. It didn't work last time, but it gives me first shot, which is cool. And then, well, I only have one more move, and I got to get out of this space. I'll be ending up going 5, and then a free turn there because I'm moving back into reaching so the turn doesn't cost me anything. Most turns don't cost you anything, but coming out of reaching costs you, which is why I had to spend one there. So this is kind of a nice little thing that I could have used elsewhere. What it denies me, though, is the ability to just slide through. I had more movement. I could have slid through and fired more guns off, but I'm going to get those guns. This guy, for example, doesn't have his, he hasn't fired his port guns. Well, when this ship moves, he'll get a chance to. He could have anyway at a partial broadsides, but he didn't want to do it. It's the end of that fairly major French first penetration of the line. Fire coming, you know, in many cases from both sides. I've still got this big squadron left. I'm not sure how that's going to line up because I kind of want to start turning it into those. Of course, I could use a couple of these to continue the movement from this squadron. They can be reshifted over, but the captain can't. He's got to do what the rest of his ships do. So that may be its own squadron there. I can take this off. That doesn't have an effect anymore. For the English, well, it looks pretty clear to me they're going to want to pass through and try to take their numeric advantage. Now over here, they may try to bring more guns to bear in the center, but that's tough to do. They're beating against the wind. I think they're just going to plow forward, straight forward. What breaks through, I'll try to join this squadron and maybe double back with the wind. It's really, really almost impossible to tack a large fleet. I'm going to be leaving so many units behind. I don't know what to say about that. The whole fleet would become disorganized, I'm afraid, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm almost thinking that swinging around the long way may be the best thing to do, even though that's a huge amount of my force that's knocked out of commission. All right, it's time to go to English center pushes upward, to a large extent doing some pretty devastating fire on ships that have already taken their licks here. But also hitting up this one. Now this one's also been hurt. This is the poor fool who turned. You see the Brits have done a turn too. That was, they got a bow rake with this guy. He passed over, but this guy wouldn't have gotten a shot. He would have had to sit there with his bow facing that ship. Now even though that thing's on fire, this, that, and the other, that seemed like too much not to get a first shot off on. Because otherwise it would get a potential bow rake on them. This guy though went nose to nose here, try to, rather than turn and get a half broadside only on this one. And now we're back to the frogs, and I think this is the only command left for them. They have to declare basically what it's doing before the Brits have to declare what their left flank does. This is not liable to get heavily engaged here. If you look, there's still some distance between. But they do have the 5 movement points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They can certainly get a couple of their ships into range to start playing in here and hurt some of the British frontline ships. I'd say overall right now it does not look good for the French. They've suffered some pretty heavy losses here. The first fire here has gone against them as well. Again, the advantage of the British having the high audacity as well as the inherent British advantage of firing at hulls. These guys aren't going to come into play this turn in full force. So what does that mean? Well, some of them may come into line. I don't know. It's going to be pretty hard for the English to do much to them. Their line is more moving through the center here. So I think we're going to have a largely unengaged French squadron there, which may be able to do some damage at some point. But in this important first clash, you've got 2/3 of the French fleet facing almost the entirety of the English fleet. You can see we may not be able to get the back line up into play. There's a ship here that didn't come into play for the English just because their formations were denser on that side. But it's not good to be able to, well, it is good to be able to concentrate your fire against a weaker segment of the opponent's forces in any kind of conflict, and in this case, the English have managed to do that. They've managed to get significant fire against these two portions, and this portion is just really being left out of the battle. We'll see. French flank squadron engages very mildly here. They damaged this ship, but they haven't really gotten into range yet to fire on the other British ships. It's a difficult situation. The Brits are going to now try to push through. We'll see where they can get with that, because they may be able to avoid this, much as these guys were at least at long range when they fired on the English, or on the French. So there may be a certain dance to avoid the danger of this overlapping of the flank. And we finish up with the English pushing in. It's such a shame. I like the simultaneous movement in something, not like, I don't know wooden ships and iron men obviously, but in something like trireme or ironclads, where you get to watch all the ships move at the same time. Here this pulsing feels like it kind of gets in the way of the story. But anyway, the English push in, and they dealt a lot of damage coming in this way. Managed to get a couple of rake-like attempts. I think one was a successful rake, the other one wasn't. Another here, although they didn't get to fire there, they just got fired on. That ship had already fired both of its broadsides on the French approach, but their formation's disrupted badly. They've got 4 ships that are facing the wrong way now, or five ships facing the wrong way, and I don't think they have a commander amongst those. If they had managed to get their commander, maybe this is him. Yeah, they do. So what's kind of nice about this is he can put these in command, but his range is only 4. 2, 3, 4. I'm not going to reach this. Can I get down here though? 1, 2, 3. So yeah, I can get, actually, no, the range is always 4 when you're doing a group command. So this ship is going to be out of command, but the rest of these, he can find lines that he can trace between the French ships to his own ships. There's going to be a mixed up, really horrible mess here, because, well, maybe all the forward-facing ones are going to be out of command. Because the problem here is I don't see a way that I can trace between here and here. And I don't have a commander on the forward-facing. So essentially half that squadron is going to be out of command, and that's going to cause some serious issues in the sense that the French could actually ignore the out-of-command ships and they can't do anything to him. We'll see, obviously with the Audacity, etc., there's a good chance they might end up in command anyway. I'll do the post-turn cleanup, and then we'll load this. That's what it looks like afterwards. The French solved, they had a couple of fires burning, they solved theirs. The English did not solve theirs. Their vulnerable ship didn't strike. I think that's all I've got. It's hard to tell. There's so many ships here, but I try to keep up with, hey, when something goes vulnerable, remembering to put the marker. It's pretty early in the battle, so it's actually kind of surprising. This is a very small ship, actually, for this battle. So we move the marker forward to turn 5. Which means no weather change for this turn. And now things get painful. Up it goes. Remembering to hold for the cutoff.